Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to another evening of Race Matters. It's a great place to be able to have those hard conversations in a safe place, and I love this show because it helps us to bring out things and make us aware. Some of us don't
Mhm.
understand things that are going on in the world, and it sometimes it doesn't apply to you because if you don't understand what other races are going through, when you hear their stories, it shocks you because you haven't experienced it. So that's why we do this show. It's a great place to have them hard conversations, and we want to thank our main host who's unable to be with us tonight due to some health problems, Miss Sharon Thomas. She just does a wonderful job on her shows. Very experienced psychologist. We want to thank Mariana and our other young brother who usually is with us, but is not with us right now, Egypt. And they bring world full of knowledge because they all have degrees and stuff. And I'm the one that just brings you the street knowledge, what I experience, my experiences, and sometimes they go further than college information because you live it. A lived experience sometimes is even greater and stronger than the taught information, because sometimes they don't base it on life experiences. They
Mhm.
just base it on teachings. And sometimes life experience tells you everything they teach isn't 100. So you
Mhm.
have to bring it. So
Oh,
we want to welcome everybody. If you're joining us live on Facebook, we thank you for joining us. If you're on YouTube, please do us a favor, share the link, join the conversation, because
mhm.
some of you all out there might want to share some experiences, and we need to have everybody sharing their experiences, because a lot of people are really surprised at the different experiences that they hear on the show. So
Mhm.
this evening's show, we're just going to hit two topics. One is called intersectionality, and
Yes.
the other one is going to be called colorism. And we're just going to just do a little expounding on the information that we have today. So we're going to start with Lady Mariana. You go ahead and start with the intersectionality, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Mariana.
Yeah, I am very excited for tonight's conversation, and I'm
Mhm.
sad that Sharon and Egypt, can't join us. But shouting out to them, and hopefully next time we'll all be together.
And hopefully she'll be typing some stuff to us, because I'm quite sure she's following the show. She just doesn't have the voice or anything. So
Yeah, we miss you, Sharon.
miss you a lot. Go ahead, Mariana.
But
Sorry.
yes, intersectionality. I think it's important to start with the definition, uh,
Mhm.
because I personally didn't know about it until my most recent class on diversity a few years ago. And, so right before COVID, I think it was 2019 when I was exposed to this term. So that's why I think it's important to give a
Right.
definition. And then, we'll talk about it and why it is important to address this. So, intersectionality is the concept that describes the ways in which systems of inequality based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, class, or any other forms of discrimination intersect. So, how they can impact each other to create unique dynamics and effects. So, as an example, for example, someone who, so we know, right, that race and gender are two,
Mhm.
ways in which people experience discrimination. And now we know in the United States, right, that, white men, in terms of pay disparity, right, they get the highest amount of pay.
Mhm.
Then, we have women in general, for every $1, we only get 77%, right? So this is gender discrimination.
Right.
Also, we know that black women get, for every $1 that a white man receives, black women have 55 cents. Right. So that just tells us this is one area, right, when it comes to pay.
Right.
In job,
Okay.
not only do black women face discrimination in regards to race, but also gender, which creates a lot of unique stressors. So if we talk about health, right, we know now that uh, you know, for example, hypertension or diabetes rate, because of these unique barriers, they would be more prevalent among people who share two or more
Right. Okay.
factors of experiencing discrimination. And it's also like difficult at times to like truly know which one, right, causes the challenge. So,
Mhm.
for example,
Well, can I ask you a question?
yeah.
Is it when I told you about when I discussed in the past when I had showed up at one of my customers' location and they asked me how it felt to be in a minority, and I thought they meant black, and
Mhm.
they really meant being a female in a male's job. Is that part of that intersection? What is it called again?
Intersectionality.
Yeah, intersectionality. Whereas I presumed it was one thing, but it was actually something totally different. Whereas I was dealing with two issues. I was dealing with the fact that I was black and that I was a female, but I crossed it over because I thought they meant black when they said, be it, how does it feel being a minority, when they really meant how did it feel being a female in what they said was a male job. Is that part
Absolutely.
of okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's like various aspects in which we can see play out. But I guess I wonder for you, like even when they explain, like, did you really think they only referred to the gender? Or was there like, do you think race also played a role in
Um,
their approach? Like, is in the sense of like, were you affected by both at that point?
I was, because I misinterpreted what they said, and it still didn't change too much because I know when I walk in on the scene, the first thing they see is my color, and then the second thing they see is that I am doing that job. So it even though it affected me that they meant female, it affected me more because I thought they meant black. So I had to actually
Mhm.
chill myself out because
Mhm.
I was ready to go. Excuse me. I was like,
Mhm.
excuse me, what did you just say? And
Mhm.
then they were like, oh, we're so sorry. That's not what we meant. But that goes to show the
Mhm.
lack of empathy that they didn't realize when they said minority, they were talking to a black person, let
Right.
alone
Yeah.
a female. So their
Right. Mhm.
insensitivity
Right.
made them not realize that they were saying that to a black person, let alone a woman.
Exactly. And so that's exactly what intersectionality is. Like, not only are you affected by discrimination when it comes to like being a woman, but also because of your skin color, and people who live in like these dual identities of
Mhm.
being part of like minorities or oppressed populations, they will experience two levels of challenges. And for example, sometimes it's a bit harder to know, right? Because also we know in some ways the challenge with like black men is that at times there's a level of being perceived as potential like scary. So I think there's definitely unique challenges. But another example could be like, what would be the experience of somebody who is black and LGBTQ,
Mhm.
right? They might like, how would their experiences be different than someone who's black and straight, right?
Yeah, because when you say that, it makes me think of um if of a black male, and I think it would be more toward black men, not even black men. Let me rephrase that. More to gay men, that
Mhm.
when they approach you see them as a man, but when they talk in like high voices and stuff, I could see people's faces change. And it's even doubly so if it's a black man, like you said, that comes up and they see this broad looking black man showing up, and then he starts talking like in a high pitch, and then they're like, so I can understand what you're saying, where they, even with females, a female might walk up and she looks like a guy because of how she's dressed, and then she's talking, but then you find out that's a female and you're like, what and people act like that. So I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so like in some of these cases, like, not, only do these people experience, you know, hardship due to
Mhm.
like, racism walking outside of their community, but now sometimes maybe within their own community, they're experiencing, either discrimination or you name it, for if it's not as accepted, right, in their community to be LGBTQ. So this is, two levels of that. Or even when we were talking, you're saying like you were in a predominantly, male job as a
Mhm.
female, right? And a few weeks ago, you talked about how you made sure to get your nails done and do all these things.
All that.
Be perceived,
You
right?
you see this right here?
Yeah.
I never went to work without that.
Mm.
Because it identified me. It made them see me as a woman in a man's job. And
Mhm.
it also, like, I had, and maybe you can explain because this might be part of what you're saying, but I always had this feeling that if I did not look more feminine, then a lot of people would think I was butch.
Right.
Because I've got broad shoulders. Because when we were growing up, and I'm not trying to take away from your
No,
conversation,
this is important. I
but
think.
when we were growing up, our mom was a quadriplegic. She was bedridden. She was paralyzed from the neck down, right? So there were a lot of times when our brothers wouldn't be home, and we would have to pull my mom up in the bed, or we would have to, maneuver her a lot. And we were only like, well, she got sick when I was 3, so it was a lifestyle for us. But I always felt me and my sister looked butchish because we would always have to lift her up and push her up in the bed and do all of this stuff, which caused us, because of our lifestyle, to have broader shoulders, more square shoulders than the average female, in my opinion. And it made us look, I
Mm.
mean, we didn't look it. We were stronger than a lot of the women that we were around. So we did look like we could play football and take a man out, you know, because we had to
Mhm.
grow up in a
So,
lifestyle. Yeah, we had to grow up in a lifestyle where we had to physically take care of our mother
mhm.
for over 30 years. So
Right.
I would over exemplify my femininity at work, making sure I had perfume on. Sometimes I would intentionally talk a little softer because I didn't want them to see me coming up there, and I didn't want to be viewed as
Mhm.
a butch type of girl. Hey, how you doing? My name, I wanted to make sure they knew I do this job, but I'm a female. You know what I mean?
So it's like and that's the point. Like we are aware of, right, people's perceptions,
Right.
right, and because we know how we show up in the world, sometimes, even though it's not our fault in any way, people would respond differently to us based on
Mhm.
these things,
Right.
right?
And
So go ahead. Yeah.
and on top of that, like you mentioned earlier, on top of that, I was dealing with the fact that I was a Black woman doing this work. And even though I worked with white women too, I always felt that they would see me different than the white women that did the work. Like if one of the white girls showed up at a location, this even happened in my job, whereas the men would treat the white women with more respect.
Mm.
And I remember one of my coworkers, he actually, when he was around me, he was cursing and disrespectful. The white guy was very disrespectful. And I would be like, yo, dude, come on, because at that point, I was in church and stuff. I was like, dude, that's not our environment. That just because I work with you, oh, you got to stop being so sensitive. You're working. This is a workplace and you're supposed to talk like that. But as soon as one of the white girls would walk in, he would change his whole demeanor
Mm.
around them. And that made me notice, wow, you don't respect me like you respect them. And I guess that's might be part of that ideology.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because that shows another level of identity and how that played out in your life. Yes. That absolutely is an example of that. Because like how would they have responded when, let's say, they were around other white men versus other Black men, and
Mhm,
then, so you see with each level, you add gender, you add race, and then you get a different response, right?
mhm. And the thing when he would say, "Oh, this is shop talk. You need to stop being so sensitive." So why didn't you do shop talk around them? Why when they walk in, the white women walk in that we work with, why would your shop talk change? So the lack of respect
Mm.
for me, to me, in my opinion, was because of my ethnicity, not because of my gender. Because when the white women would walk in, you would change how you they he would always change how he would talk. He wouldn't cuss as much, and he never did quote unquote what he would call shop talk when they entered the scene. But
Mm.
if they weren't around, he expected me
Yeah.
to
Was that
be okay with his shop talk.
yeah? Was that something that you ever like felt comfortable to point out? Like, how do you think you would have responded if that was something that was addressed?
I always addressed him. I was like, dude, you need to chill. I even told my boss one time, I said, listen, if you ever talk like that around me again, you're going to lose your job. I said, because our bylaws say that you can't make me feel uncomfortable and you can't talk like that. You know, I said, and if you continue with this, I will report you to your superior. You know, but why did I have to push that envelope? You know, you didn't do it
Yeah.
around them yet, and I knew it. In my opinion, I'm not going to say I know it, but in my opinion, it's because I'm black. You think all black people are ghetto. You think all black people do what you see we are implied of doing from television. And you take the images of shows that depict us a certain way and you put it on all of us. And I used to tell people that's not us. That's not how we act. That's how you portray us.
Right.
And then I would, like I said, I would always have to address that issue. It's like when she
and that says a lot, right? If you had addressed it repeatedly and that wasn't changing.
Once I jumped on them, they would chill out, but I would always have to reiterate it. It wasn't that once I did it, then they said, okay, we got to chill. Now, mind you, majority of the guys that I work with were unbelievably respectful toward me, especially because they knew I was a Christian. But you have those certain particular people. I had another coworker, and I don't know if this is kind of like what we're talking about, but he, acted like you're my friend. But every time he had a chance, he would denigrate his stepdaughter because she was dating a black guy and telling me that they better not ever have kids. I don't think mixed couples should ever have kids because those kids will be mongrels. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, interracial. I'm like, dude, do you know who you're talking to? And that I don't understand how you can be comfortable
saying those things, yeah,
in your feelings like that towards someone who you're actually talking about, even though you ain't using my name, because what you're saying about your grandkids is who I am, interracial.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're telling me I'm not good enough.
Well, that's his belief, right? But
yeah. Well, but that's what I was thinking. You're acting like my friend, but you're letting me know I'm not good enough to be your friend. Because if your own grandkids aren't good enough, then who do I think I am to think I'm going to be good enough? And I let him know. I said, dude, you know what? We need to end this right now. We're co-workers. Let's keep it that way. I will never come back to your house. We don't have to do this anymore because I know who you are. I see who you are. And you want me to justify your feelings when your feelings is really about me too.
Right. And that's just it. Sometimes people would say like, oh, these are just like differences of opinion. Like the moment your opinion dehumanizes someone else's lived experience, and not just the experience, who they are as human beings, that tells you a lot in terms of like how much you can trust them as friends.
Right.
So another thing that's often common with, intersectionality is
let's just go open the door for Emily.
Is like disabilities, right? So again, we can talk about a woman who might have a disability, right, or a Black woman with a disability, right? So at this point we have 3 levels, right, of discrimination. Because we know, U.S. a few weeks ago when we had the debate, right, here in Pennsylvania, Fetterman versus Dr. Oz, we saw just how much ableism, is present in the U.S.
Yeah.
We do, and I actually am curious to hear from you about your experiences with your mom, having a disability and being a Black woman with a disability. Like, in what ways her?
Well, the one thing that always it wasn't until I became adult and really realized this
Mm-hmm.
situation, but I believe that she wasn't able to get disability because she was black, and that's just my opinion. Because there's no way that my mom applied for disability and was denied.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my opinion. I'm just saying it was my
Mm-hmm.
opinion that they felt that they could give her less money with just Social Security than if they gave her Social Security disability. If they gave her disability, they would have to cut her a much bigger check.
Wow.
So to have a mother who is paralyzed from the neck down and the system deny her disability benefits was very, as when I became an adult, it was highly offensive. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
how could they deny her disability? And once she was receiving Social Security for all of them years, they won't switch it. They won't switch you once you're receiving Social Security. Back then, they wouldn't switch you up to disability. But again, she had received Social Security since I was 3, 4 years old, and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I became an adult and realized that she's not getting disability; she's only getting Social Security. Why would they deny her that? You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was how the system did it. Just like, we want to give her the minimum that we can give her because she's a woman of color. That was my feelings.
Mm-hmm. And so, and this is very common, right?
Hmm.
When we talk to like people of color who are women who may experience some other levels of so when we talk about discrimination, I think yes, we can address the individual choices, and yet a lot of these work at a systemic level too,
Hmm.
right? So when we see that, like, for every dollar
Yeah, yeah,
that a white man makes
yeah.
in the West, a black woman makes 55 cents. Like, that's a
Hmm.
systemic issue. It's not something that happens only like in Philadelphia, right? It's across
Right.
the US.
Yeah.
And I saw a chart that was like rating different states, and there was differences, right? Maybe in some parts of the country that tried to address this, maybe the disparity was not as big, but still, regardless, there's still disparity in
Yes.
part of the US. So
Hmm.
that tells us a lot of these things are embedded in the systems
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
this country, from media to laws to how people talk about other people, how we treat
Hmm.
those who might have some of these identities that we addressed today. So if, I know your mom, right, could still speak even though she was paralyzed,
Oh
right?
yeah, her mind was good, was wonderful. Her speech was fine, but like from the neck down, she could do nothing for herself. She
So
was, you know.
would she be able to, like, would she tell stories about what it was like for her,
Oh, my mom's passed on.
right? But like, maybe before she did, like, you know, would she talk about her experience, like being a woman and having a disability and being of color?
No, you know what? I guess because I was a child when she got sick, and it was a lifestyle for us. It wasn't just that my mother all of a sudden got sick. I guess because it was a lifestyle for us, we never really discussed it because when people would ask, "Oh,
Mhm.
your mother's sick," they would see us pushing her in wheelchairs and stuff. "Oh, your mother's sick," and we would be like, "No, she's not sick." And they would be like, yeah, she is. She's in a wheelchair." And we were like, "No, she just can't move from the neck down, but she's not sick. If she was sick, she'd be in the hospital." Because see, her being a quadriplegic was just a lifestyle for us, and I feel for people that have to deal with that, like, because when a lot of people talk about caregivers,
Mhm.
um that was a lifestyle for us, and I understand that struggle. So that's one area that if I ever needed to talk to somebody about caregiving, I could tell them. I could tell it. We would have to make, if ambulance people came to get my mother, we would have to stop them and put her in the their bed and stuff for them, or help to get her in certain things, because we knew how her body worked. And when they would try and work with her, they would hurt her
Wow.
because they weren't experienced, and she was dead weight because she was and so we would have to say, "No, her, let us do it. Let us help you. Let us help. Let us get it done." So, but it was you walk around. I guess as a child, all I used to just say, I wish my mom was walking. I wish, we didn't have to grow up like this. But then honestly, I wouldn't be the type of person I am today. It really shaped who I am today. And I think I love who I am, the type of person I am, how compassionate me and my brothers and sisters are. We'll see somebody that's handicapped, and if somebody disrespects them, we don't care what race or you disrespect somebody that is handicapped, and we will almost go off on you.
But so you have noticed that people would do that, like they would
Yeah.
respect others who are right. But you're so right. I think that, and that's the beauty sometimes of being part of a marginalized community one way or another. Like the compassion it can teach you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? When I think about it, I guess that's part of that. The title that you're giving. I keep wanting to. I don't want to mess it up by saying intersectionality. I don't want to mess it up saying it. But we were dealing with biracial, and then female, and then a person whose family lives off the system because you have a mother.
So low income, right?
Yes. So not only lower income, but lower income, because your mother, who was a quadriplegic, wasn't even given the respect of being called disabled, even though she was disabled. So for people that grow up like that, we question why other people, when they run into hardship, cry, whine, and complain. And we're like, what is wrong with you?
Right.
And they're like, oh, I don't believe this is happening to me. And we're like, well, that's the lifestyle we've lived since we've been in this country. What do you mean?
Right. And only that alone is not a big deal. Like we have to deal with that and this and this and that.
Oh, you're upset because you lost your job. Well, we ain't got no job, and our mother isn't even deemed disabled. So welcome to our neck of the woods. If you want to know how to survive, talk to us. We know how to survive in this country, being looked at and treated as if you're worthless, as if you don't count.
And that's the challenge, right? Sometimes, how do you, like for you, Rosie, having been through some of these experiences, like what did that process look like for you to like not believe those messages? Was there a time when it was more tempting and then you said, no, my value is not based on like how society views me based on these things, and you had to like pull yourself up? Like how did you not give in to action story?
You know what, Mariana, let me try and put it like this. When it is the way of your lifestyle, then you learn how to deal with it. You don't actually look at yourself negatively. You just keep it moving. And if anything, I'm not trying to promote any type of or say that violence is the right way to go. But then you want to know why so many people of color are so violent, because we're tired of y'all treating us like that. You're not going to keep treating us like crap. We're valuable. And I don't think it was until I got saved that I realized my value, and I'm going to talk about that because part of that is with the colorism that we're going to talk about.
Right.
But even with that, you have to understand that when it's a lifestyle for you, then you don't realize that you're marginalized until you leave your area, until you come out of the lifestyle you live in and enter into someone else's reality. And then you're like, wow. And then you see all the benefits, but you try to go get some of them benefits and you can't.
I see. Yeah. So did it feel like a home? You had the safe space where all of these things did not matter. So you had the space where you could go back and you're valued for who you were.
Well, we had to work on it because actually where we grew up, the street we grew up on, we were the only Black family. So we did have to address people's attitudes. There was I think I mentioned it before, but my mom used to talk about when she first moved on that street, because when we first moved on that street, she was walking. It was on that street that she started to lose her ability to walk and move and stuff. But she said a letter was being passed around the community to remove us.
Mm.
saying there's a black family moved on our street, and they sent a petition around to have us taken out of our home. And one of the neighbors actually liked my mom, and when the letter got to her, she took it to my mom,
That's good. Yeah.
and my mom addressed the whole community, came outside with her kids, lined them up, and addressed it.
But like
Mhm,
that just speaks to like you didn't have to leave very far. You just like left the boundary of your door, and on the other
mhm,
side of the door, you already had to face some of these things.
mhm.
But
And
you,
luckily, I didn't understand it because I was only 3 when we moved on that street. So I didn't understand the magnitude. My oldest brother and sister might have, but I didn't realize what was going on because I was a baby, you know.
yes, yeah, yeah. Hmm. But we can see, like sometimes how you might not remember, but
Hmm.
kids take in the tension that
Hmm.
around them are
Yeah,
feeling,
yeah,
right? And if we were to like consider like the long-term stress and the impact of that on like the body, right? We know
hmm,
now how high cortisol levels for a long period of time can create, health
right,
conditions later on, and you name it.
right,
So this is how we see this now, that when it comes to, and on one hand, it's challenging with the US to see, again, I go back to this, some of these consequences because US as a country, because of the access to like fast foods and whatnot, a lot of white people are impacted as well. But people of color are that much more impacted.
right. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think like, we talked last week a bit with Egypt when we're talking about addictions and such, but like limited access to like healthy foods. But in addition to that, stress itself can
Hmm.
create
Hmm.
physical health problems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all of that compounds it. I don't think I ever um stressed about it. I think my stress was just dealing with my mom being sick and us the way we had to, grow up in that type of lifestyle. But you learn to rebound. If you're a black person in America, you are the most rebounding type of people in the world because
Mm-hmm.
we we can be offended and still come out on the other side talking to that person and trying to give that person respect, because it's what we had to do. It's how we had to live, and all of this would be is a good segue to go right into colorism, because
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about colorism, and just for the definition for some of you all out there, I have paperwork. That's because I want to make sure I don't say anything wrong, because we try to keep everything as close to the truth of the matter as we can, and we don't want to mislead anybody. But when we're talking about colorism, one of the definition is uh, prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Colorism. Okay. Now, the NCCJ, which is the National Conference of Community and Justice, they define colorism as a practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are treated more favorably than those with darker skin. This practice is a product of racism. It's a product of racism in the United States. Now, don't take it from the United States, but it's really around the world. It's not just United States. United States ain't the bad dog in this fight. It's around the world, really, in that it upholds the white standards of beauty and benefits white people in the institution of oppression, meaning media, medical world, and things like that. And the reason I say this is a good segue, now again, it is a byproduct. Colorism is the child,
Mm-hmm.
is the child
Mm-hmm.
of racism.
Yep. Yep.
Colorism was birthed
Mm-hmm.
from racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really, I have to be so honest with you all. I never dealt with colorism. And when I say I never dealt with it, I'm not saying I never experienced it. I didn't know anything about colorism until we started talking about it on this show.
Hmm.
And I really never looked into it because I still didn't understand it.
Mm.
So I said, I don't understand it. I'm not really going to get deep into colorism. I don't know. It's just, I guess, dealing with people. But to prepare for this show, I actually went back and watched some videos. One of them was a talk show in 1988 that talked about colorism.
Mhm.
And it shocked me because my experience, I've dealt with colorism
Mhm.
in my life.
Mhm.
And I'm going to just give you all a couple
Mhm.
experiences that I went through.
Mhm.
One of them was when I was a child with my brothers and sisters. Now, I'm one of the darker ones. Okay. And I remember a relative looking at me and saying, "You're funny looking."
Mm.
And it affected me because once that relative said that, that was a relative I loved and looked up to. And we all couldn't wait till that relative came over. And we would just run around and be, and you just love seeing him. And when he looked at me and said, "You're funny looking,"
Mm.
from that day until after I became an adult and started going to church, I'm being honest with you all. I used to hide behind my brothers and sisters when people would come over
Mm.
because I thought that I was funny looking because I was darker and my hair wasn't as good as theirs. And I thought that's
Mm.
what he meant when he said I was funny looking because I didn't have the kind of hair they had. And
Mm.
and I had good hair. And
Mm.
even when I became an adult, let me tell you how bad colorism can affect a person. Even when I became an adult, when people would look at me and say, "Oh my God, you have beautiful skin,"
Mm.
I would look in the mirror and say, "What are they looking at? Look at you."
Mm.
I would look in the mirror and try to figure out what this person is saying. They don't need to lie to me. They can tell me the truth. I know I'm not cute. I know I'm funny looking. I know
Mm.
I'm too dark. I know my hair ain't good and I got to do stuff to make it look half as good as my family members, my sisters and brothers, And
Mm.
and then a couple more things, if you don't mind me sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
But I remember when we would
Mm.
we would start dating, and my mother would have a problem with us bringing in dark guys.
Mm.
But then I found out where she got it from because one day she said, "My father told me, don't you bring no boots in this house."
Mm.
A boot was a black man.
So that.
Back then, those water boots that they wear that are black. So then I understood why she felt the way she did. Now, mind you,
Mhm.
I didn't know what colorism was. It wasn't until I was watching these shows that I realized
You
it was
put that into
colorism.
those experiences.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
colorism.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and then my oldest sister, and this is the last thing, and then we could,
Mhm.
discuss it. But the last thing, and I've shared this with you all, that my oldest sister probably didn't understand that she was dealing with colorism was when she was working at a law firm, and I knew all of her coworkers and everything because I was an outside technician working for a utility company, and my jobs were always in her area. So we always had lunch together almost every day.
Mhm.
And not only would I have lunch with her, but I would have it with the coworkers and the lawyers and stuff. I mean, it was how I was able to buy my house and get an attorney for free because the attorney was like, "Donna, I'll take care of your sister. I'll show her. I'll go to the, settlement with her, and I'll sit down with her, and I'll be her attorney, and we'll write it off as, one of those, write-offs that they helped somebody,
Mhm.
that didn't have the funds." And they started laying them off. And my sister called me and she said, "Rosie, guess who just got fired?" And
Mhm.
she mentioned the girl's name. And then she mentioned another girl's name. I said, "Ah, so they're getting rid of the black folk."
Mhm.
Now, of course, my sister jumped to their defense immediately. Not what? Why would you say? Now, my sister was between my shade and your shade, Mariana, my oldest sister. She's between my shade and your shade.
Mhm.
So she said, Rosie, come on now. Everything isn't a racial thing. They're just, getting rid of people because they got to cut back. I said, nah, nah. Think
Mhm.
about the two people that were let go. They started with the darkest and then they moved up.
That makes.
And I told her, I said, your day is coming. She said, "No, Rosie, stop. No, it's not like that. It's not like that." I said, "They're getting rid of the dark people." I said, "You're palatable." That's what I told her.
Mm.
"You're palatable. Why? That's why they didn't start with you." I said, "But you better get ready."
Mhm.
And 2 weeks later, she called me. It
And
was her
what?
turn. It was her turn.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
said, "Y'all all need to get together and file a class action because they got rid of all the black people, all the minorities in there." You know?
Oh, yeah. And when I hear stories like that, and then people claiming that racism is not real, like, of course, I want that to be the reality. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
I wish we weren't dealing with this.
Mhm.
The reason I think a lot of this is like really frustrating when you hear people not believe it is that, yeah, it's a level of gaslighting, as if like
Mhm.
your experience is not valid and it's somehow
Yeah.
all in your head. When
Mhm.
we have, story after story of people through
Yeah.
these experiences. Yeah,
And
but
and 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 like I said, I didn't realize that it's not only black and white, but it's black on black, and
mm-hmm.
when you deal with colorism, when I was here watching those shows, and really, Mariana, you should. I'll probably send some of the videos to you to
Yes, please.
watch
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
it, and but the depth of it, because the one talk show that I was talking about, um uh,
Mhm.
the different shades of black people that were in there were talking about their experiences. And one of the light-skinned black girls, she said, when she was in the black community, they were following her home and calling her vanilla bean, and and stuff like that. And you know what, to even talk about that, even my mom, now I remember this, but when they had first moved um to New Jersey from wherever they had grown up, she talked about the high school that she was going to.
Mhm.
And because her hair was straight and pretty, because we have Indian in our blood and different things like that. So my mother and my aunts and stuff have gorgeous hair, long hair and stuff. But she remembers walking home from school and them spitting in her hair because her hair was prettier than theirs, and she was light skinned, and they would spit on her and they would put gum in her hair. And the day that it stopped from my mom, she was telling the story. She said, my grandmother had told her, "Don't come in this house like that again.
Mhm.
If somebody does something to you, you better handle it. Don't let them keep doing this to you. And don't you come in my house with bubble gum in your hair," because my grandmother would have to cut her hair because the gum would be stuck all in the hair and she can't get that out. So my mother, the last time it happened, my mother, I guess she had kind of a tantrum situation, but the kids were doing it, putting gum in her hair, spitting in her hair, and she doesn't remember. She said all she knows is she blacked out. And when she came to herself, she just beat the girl so bad, and fought it was a number of girls that she beat up
Mhm.
because she just went off.
Yeah.
And when
Mhm.
she went home, my grandmother was mad at her because she didn't realize what happened, but she saw the gum in her hair, the spit in her hair, and she was about to get beat, or punished or beat or whatever, because she came home again like that. But then a knock came on the door, and it
Uh,
was the mother of the girls saying, "Your daughter did this to our daughter." She said, "I told her to." She said, "Because I'm sick and tired of your daughter spitting in her hair and putting gum in her hair." And it was because she was lighter and she had pretty hair. So that colorism, she had to deal with it. My
Absolutely, yeah. And then, so was this like from like black girls or?
Yeah, yeah. She was going to a high school that was at that time predominantly black at the time. Now, of course, back in the beginning, those schools that they went to were predominantly white and changing over to predominantly black. So
Mhm.
when she was going to the school, it was predominantly black, and she was lighter. She had the pretty hair, and every time she went home, my grandmother had to clean her hair because the black girls would spit in her hair and this and that and do different things like that.
And and I asked that, I think, because even when you're saying your mom later was telling you all about not bringing men that were like too dark skinned,
Mhm.
and tying that back to your comment that colorism is the child of racism,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think in many ways it makes sense when, you live in a society that, says certain messages about the color of your skin. I'm sure your mom didn't want her kids to go through the same thing, right? I
Well,
mean,
it's not only, yeah, it's not only that, but when you think about it now, now I'm going to say this word on here, but it's a real word, and it was a word that came from slavery. But you had house niggers, and you had the niggers that worked in the field. Now, I'm not saying that to be offensive, but in slave times, that's what you were called.
mhm,
Now, most of the house ones were the children of slave women who were raped by their masters.
mhm,
They weren't they weren't good enough to be their children, but they did not want their children out in the field with the dark ones, so they made them house slaves. And really studying this thing on colorism, but
mhm,
it came from from back in slavery. And the other thing that it did was it gave the lighter um black people in America, it gave them the opportunity that when their fathers would die, they would automatically be freed,
mhm,
because they would have something written that when I die, this is my child, and they will be freed. They won't. They will no longer be slaves. So the opportunity of having lighter skin, light hair, and things like that gave you so many more opportunities,
mhm,
you know. And even the mentality of the lighter slaves,
mhm,
they would look down on the darker slaves that were working in the field and stuff like that. I remember watching a show
mhm,
on slavery,
mhm,
and the slave owner had raped one of the slaves. Now, he raped a slave that was mixed, so I think it was the house slave. So he raped her. It wasn't his child, but she was light skinned,
mhm,
and he raped her, and the child came out looking white.
mhm,
Now, they made her nurse the baby,
mhm,
but his wife raised the child, and the child would call her mom the N-word, call her a nigger, slave, and all of this. But it was her mother, and she never knew it, because they would not allow her
to be raised
to
by.
be the mother of that child, because the child
Mhm.
was light enough to pass as white. And I remember that story, and it hurt my heart, because the mother said she didn't care that her daughter treated her and acted like that towards her as a low life slave, because she knew her daughter would have a better opportunity. And
Yeah.
she cared more for her daughter's future than
Wow.
how her daughter was raised to treat her,
Wow.
and
Just speaks
that's
to
where.
the experience of pain, of knowing how painful it is in those
Mhm,
positions. And so, and if we were to ask, right,
mhm,
deep down, if it wasn't for racism and for slavery, I'm sure she would have wanted a child to look like her. She would have wanted a no dark skinned child. But because of racism, you know, there was a level of reassurance maybe in the lighter skin of her child, because
mhm,
the child, meant that they could experience a life with more opportunities and less discrimination.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
like that just speaks to how powerful these things are. Yeah.
And
Um,
see, the sad part is people don't understand that when the system for decades,
mhm,
for generations, have
mhm,
programmed you
mhm,
that this is better, then you grow up systemically messed up, thinking that
mhm,
I'm not as good as those because I'm too dark. My hair ain't good. And if
mhm,
I want an opportunity, I was to let you understand how deep this thing of colorism is. Now we're talking about black and white and this and that.
mhm,
I was watching a documentary
mhm,
from the Philippines,
mhm,
how the Filipino women, especially, go to different clinics and get a IV drip of some kind of liquid that
Mhm.
is supposed to um lighten, like get the melanin out of
Mhm.
their skin. And
Mhm.
the Filipino women were talking about, the lighter you are, the better you are. And some of them were talking about, I don't have as many opportunities because I'm dark. And I'm looking at them and saying, where are you dark? You know,
Exactly.
but still,
Yeah, or like blue
the
skin
idea, the,
shame on.
right, the thought process that to be whiter is to be better and have more opportunities. This we're in it. Our I was going to say country. Our world is really sick.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been hearing recently that in a lot of Asian countries too, they're also like doing eye surgeries for like in Korean, Japanese,
Hmm.
Chinese
Hmm.
women, to like look closer to a white person too. And it's just sad because like we know like those things don't equal beauty, right? There's beauty in each unique ethnicity, and the fact that people think they need to like change who they are, uh, it really is sad.
And I see a comment. I think Lady Sharon mentioned it, but she said a major theme in Spike Lee's movie, and that's the crazy thing, Sharon. The talk show that I was watching, it was based on Spike Lee's movie, and they talked about the jigaboo and the wannabes.
Hmm.
And a jigaboo was a black person with afros and dark, the whole afro, complexion and stuff, and them being themselves. And the wannabes were the light skins who wanted to be more white. And that's basically what that talk show was about. It's about Spike Lee's movie, and it was dealing with colorism and how darker people didn't have the opportunities and weren't given the chances, and how lighter skinned people wouldn't really associate with darker people because they were afraid that it would mess up, how people viewed them and make them not look as great as they wanted to look, and the different things like that. And you have black people back then pressing their hair because they figured if they want to make it in the world, then at least they can press their hair. And then they would try and bleach their skin and do all of these things because society had told them that the darker you are, the less you are. So they did everything they could to try to meet the world's standards of what good was. and
Hmm.
and that's where it takes an act of God to
Hmm.
teach people to love
Mhm.
and be themselves and not worry about what people
Right.
think.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I was curious for your experience because you're saying, you know, prior to doing some of this research, you didn't know too much about it. And I know you described your experience with your family and this relative that made a comment about you. And maybe like in comparison to your siblings, your skin complexion is a bit darker, but I would say that, your skin is also still quite light.
Yeah.
Do you think in some ways, you weren't as aware of colorism because you were like among, African American communities, your skin was on the lighter side?
Well, no, because even though my skin is on the lighter side, I still am not light enough in our society's ideology of light skin.
Hmm.
My sister, yeah. My older sister, yeah. I have a cousin, absolutely. My cousin, her co-workers treated her as their equal until they met my aunt, her mother.
Hmm.
And when she took, and I think I mentioned this on here before, but when my cousin took her mom to a company party and her white co-workers were shocked that her mother was black, and she realized that when she started going to work after they met her mother, all of the white coworkers started treating her differently because now they realized she was black. She
Wow.
don't look nothing like a black girl, but now they said, oh, she's black.
Wow.
You can have a drop of black in you, and that makes you not good enough for white America. and I'm not talking about all of them, what we're talking about. We're just having that hard conversation. But when you're dealing with racism and when people are dealing with racism, a drop of black deems you black. When you're dealing with racism.
Yeah, I heard someone speak to how, in some ways, U.S. would look at what happened with the Holocaust in Germany and say, like, that was like so much. But then, like, I don't even think the rates were the same with like being considered Jewish. Like the percentage is not as small to be seen as Jewish in Germany. Which
And see,
like how deep racism can go.
But see, there was something that Whoopi said, and she got a whooping on it. But she was talking about, and she wasn't being disrespectful. But what she was, and this is where we have to understand people. We're not trying to act like things didn't happen. But she was explaining to people on her show that a Jewish person and a German person, you don't know who's Jewish and German until you start talking to each other and finding out who your family is.
Exactly.
Because see, your racism is with ethnicity based on you're being Jewish or you're being German, whereas ours is on sight. The moment you see us, we're different than you. And her thing was that her argument was, well, Jewish people, you the only reason you dealt with discrimination is because they found out who you were by talking to you and finding out who your family was. But you didn't deal with racism as a black person does, because soon as we show up, we're shunned. Today is different. It's still happening. But back in the day, once a black person showed up on the scene, you were not good enough to be with them. So it was ours is outside, yours is inside. Your difference was internal, ours is external, and ours supersedes yours because as soon as they look at us, they already have a prejudgment about us. That's what prejudice is, prejudging. So you prejudge us on sight, whereas you prejudge them on your knowledge of who they are. So that's what Whoopi was talking about. She got a whooping from it, but people don't understand that when we talk about these type of things, it's not because we're saying Jews didn't go through stuff and they didn't deal with this, that, and the other thing. But this is where my problem is. If we really want to handle the situation with the Holocaust and what happened to Jewish people, then your daggone well should be dealing with my people and slavery, because see, that happened in our country, whereas the Holocaust happened in their country. So we're so bent on making sure that the Jewish people get reparations and get everything that they should get for the horrible acts that happened to them. Well, then we should get it first because you did this to us. You are people who we were forced to come here and build this country, build this nation, and yet you tell us we shouldn't be getting reparations. And yet a person who was offended in their own country by their people, yet you stand by them and you say this happened and we got to do the right thing by them. Do the right thing by your own people who you're.
Absolutely. It's like you lasted much longer, right? For generations.
Yeah. And we still dealing with it today. That's why they're trying to stop all of the voting rights. They're still doing it today.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy, but these are conversations that need probably 2 hours show. This might have to be a weekend discussions that we can have a couple hours in the show, instead of one, because it's so important. And I pray that people watch it and share their comments on how they dealt with it and, how they dealt with colorism and all of that and their experiences. And if they have positive, please share that too, because we need to know it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see Sharon also has added a few comments now that you spoke about people sharing their experiences. So there's a few comments from her. Let's see. Yep. Yeah. Remember the movie Imitation of Life? Great movie. The light-skinned black girl was passing for white and had a white boyfriend. And then when he found out his girlfriend's mother was black, he called her the N-word and beat
Yep.
her up.
Mm-hmm. And then she also put up there, it also created a superiority in light-skinned blacks and an inferiority in dark-skinned blacks that still exists today. Racism created this colorism. And that's what a lot of people, they may get mad when they hear us say that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, colorism is the birth child
Mm-hmm.
of racism.
Yeah, and that's the part, I think that sometimes people need to understand, right? Talking about an experience is just shedding light on an issue, right? That doesn't mean that, we're saying the entire country or, even Anupi's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Naming this does not deny, the other one. She was not saying that Jewish people did not experience pain.
Right.
Saying, the pain of Black people should also be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And there's levels of complexity to this that these people didn't experience. So, like, these are the things I think sometimes people need to realize when somebody brings an issue up, is because to address something, first we need to name it. We need to name when there's an injustice and what to address it.
Yep. Yep. My niece had given me a book a while ago to read, and I read it, and it was interesting. And the crazy part was, it wasn't even an old book. The book was written in, I think, 2019 or 2020, and it was a true story about a black woman who was a doctor, and how, she wasn't given the respect or anything, as a doctor, because she was a black doctor, and she was in a race. She lived in a racist state with a lot of racist people. They wouldn't let her touch their kids or nothing like that. If they walked in, and they would say, "Get this nigger away from, this N-word away from my child," and this and that. And in that movie, there was the white girl that was married to this. They were racist. The white couple, very, very, very racist and stuff. And they had a child, and what happened was the child had gotten sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to treat the child, but they kept saying, "Women, but your child's blood, it just something's wrong." And they were stone cold racists. And they were the type that believed that a drop of black meant you were black and you weren't good enough. It come to find out that the wife, she was white, blonde hair, blue eyed, and all that. When she started digging into it, her mother went to her to tell her who she was. She had a black mother. And when the girl found out, now her husband, well, let me put it this way. When the girl found out, she started cutting her wrists and stuff because she was trying to bleed the black blood out of herself. She died. She ended up killing herself. She ended up dying, committing suicide, because she couldn't handle the fact that she had black blood in her bloodstreams. And she ended up committing suicide. And the crazy part was, later on in the movie, because the doctor left that place and opened her own clinic, that man brought his child into her clinic. And when she saw him, she was like, "Do I treat his child?" Because they lied on her, act like she was mistreating their kid, all lies and stuff. So, and they started saying the reason their son is getting worse is because a black doctor was working on them and shouldn't have touched their kid and this and that. Well, come to find out that he started going to her clinic for treatment. And when she walked in the room, she was like, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, I'll leave and get another doctor." And he said, "No, no, no, you don't have to." Because now he realized that his child was black. His child didn't look it, but now he knew that his wife had black in her blood. And now he realized that so did his child. And he was not willing to turn his back on his child just because his child had black blood in him. So it was a positive for the father, but a negative for the mother, where she ended up committing suicide because she couldn't handle the fact. And it was a true story. And it's so sad that racism has done so much damage to countries, not America, just America, but the countries. To that poison has done so much damage to the world, and getting out of it just seems like it's hard, because so many people are trying to go back to that mindset today. You know, that you got all of these people that came under our last president who now wants to whiten America again, you know. So I bet
Yeah.
Sharon,
Next week we're gonna talk about his new announcement.
mhm. Sharon's probably laughing at us looking at the time. She probably thinking they running over and they talk about getting off all the time.
Yeah, and it's just two of us, so we can still run over.
Yes, we still running over the time. But
Okay.
anyway,
Well,
but
thank you for sharing your experiences, Rose.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? And I'm sorry, and I know we're running over, but have you noticed experiencing anything like that? Like where people treated you differently, maybe even though you're light skinned, you might have dark hair. I mean, that because all colorism is colorism in my opinion, don't matter. Have you ever
Oh yeah. Well, so not necessarily in the sense of like being told directly. So like my experience has been with like yes, darker hair and eyes, but you know my skin tone was pretty light. But yeah, no, in Eastern Europe, you know, being blonde and having blue eyes was seen more beautiful
right?
than being a brunette. So absolutely, you know, like people would react, you know, in the sense of like there was a lot more attention given to like
Hmm.
or like
With the green eyes or blue eyes and
eyes
all of that.
and yes and blonde hair, and we are like right at the border with Ukraine and some Russian influence, so there's quite
Hmm.
a bit of both, like even in my family. So my brother's kids both have blue eyes, and then my sister has 6 kids and 2 of them have blue eyes. So my dad has green eyes, my brother has green bluish, but you know my mom was a bit darker, and there were times when she was called a gypsy for being darker. And you know, I've seen her experiences with dealing with that.
Wow. Wow.
So
You know,
it exists everywhere.
it's sad how hate has to find a way. You know, I mean, if we don't have black people, we'll find a reason. We'll find a reason. That's why I love Jane Elliott's thing about the brown eyed, blue eyed babies. You know, and when she does that study on brown eyed and blue eyed, and she does it in her school with the kids, and you know, it's amazing that hate will find a way if it doesn't have the people that it wants to attack, it'll find some other issue
Mhm.
to attack on, you know. And that's why I
Mhm.
tell people, you know, you need to watch yourself, because if you hate black people, if all black people leave America, they're gonna find you next. They're gonna find something in you that they hate, because hate has to have an outlet.
Yeah, because people like power. So whatever
Hmm.
means, you know, you need to do that, right? This is why we talked about intersectionality today.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And Sharon is laughing our time, but
I know.
this will be my final comment. We didn't even talk a lot about the ways in which we have privilege as well with
Mhm.
intersectionality, right? So I talked about 2 levels of, you know, oppression, but so you mentioned becoming a Christian. Well, as a Christian in the US, you do have privilege, right? Like what's the experience of a Muslim black woman versus a
Mhm.
Christian black woman in the
Right, right, right.
US?
Yep.
So like those things also like, you know, matters a lot too.
And I remember hearing like back in the day how with racism, how like poor white people, they would say, "Man, you're poor." And they say, "Yeah, but I'm not black." You know, because it was okay to be poor, you just couldn't be black. You know, and that's such a mentality. That is such a sick mentality to say, "I may be poor, but I'm not black." You know, it's like what?
Yeah.
You're right. Listen, I bet you need to want to be a rich black person, dude.
Exactly. I'll take
Don't
plenty
you want to be a
options.
rich black person than a hateful white poor person? Like,
Exactly. Like,
oh,
yeah, I'll take the
mm,
beauty and the money.
yeah, any day. So,
Oh
but guys,
yeah,
look.
I agree. I agree.
It's just two of us on here tonight, and we are having such a good time. Then again, we've run over, but we are going to have to end the show. But you know, we're going to have
A
a
part two.
segment, a part two of this,
Yeah, sure.
where we have Sharon on and Egypt on, because you know this goes so deep, and there's so much we haven't even scratched the surface
Exactly. Exactly.
of colorism and intersection. Say it again,
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality. We haven't even scratched the surface
Yep.
of these things. And it's what, unfortunately, I'm going to tell the truth. It's what drives our country.
Exactly.
This hate is what drives our country, and you know it it's something that we have to continue. But we're going to have a part two
Yes.
with our fearless leader, Miss Sharon, and hopefully Egypt will join us. But this discussion is it's got to be broadened, and I'm hoping and praying that those of you all that listen on an off day or something like that, and you happen to stumble on and watch it and you hear what we're talking about, I'm hoping that you get inspired to join us when we talk about this again, and share your experiences and your information and how you dealt with colorism, if you did, or even say, I've never heard of this before, I want to know more about this. So listen, you all have a great night. We really appreciate you watching, and any comments. We want to thank Miss Sharon for sending a couple comments our way, and we want to ask you all to have a blessed night. Enjoy your evening, rest well, wake up in the glory of God. Well, have a great night. Bye-bye.